I think the jury's out on whether 5.0 itself is great.
Building a moat around your existing organization is not a strategy. That is a I'm sorry, it is a strategy. It's a strategy for failure.
Yeah. Yeah, because a moat can trap you as much as it can defend you. Like, should
Right.
the CEO be worried about the CEO's job? Could they be replaced by an AI agent? Good morning, Peter.
Hey, good morning, David. How are you
How are you?
today?
I'm
I'm
good, thank
good.
you.
Yourself?
Yeah, welcome to Call Me Data again.
Again. I think I forget how many episodes is this now. We have a lot of episodes out there now.
I feel like it's getting to be quite a few. Um,
Yeah.
well, hey, it's a Monday morning as we're recording this. It was a busy week last week in the world of AI, as they all seem to be. Um, but I want to start out maybe by talking about the big news out of OpenAI last week and the GPT-5o models. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. They've taken a bit of a different approach to it, and there's been a lot of chatter out there and a lot of noise, to be honest. Um, some not so good, unsurprisingly. I mean, that's I think typical, but I mean, they seem to be their strategy seems to be unifying on a single model that is all encompassing. But I think there's some tweaks. I don't think it's quite that black and white. Like if you read a little bit deeper into the press release that they let out and some of the details, they've basically put a router in front of everything. So it decides based on uh, types of questions you answer, how you prompt the model, where it should go. So it's not 100% clear to me
Interesting.
if like really they just put models behind the scenes or it's really a true big monolithic model and it's just taking a different internal approach.
Right. So it sounds like it could either be, as you're saying, a facade in front of multiple different models where you've got
Right.
one UI, it looks like you're talking to a model and then it gets routed to different models. Or
Yeah.
I guess if
Yeah.
it
So
really
it's not clear, but you
was,
know what?
go
Go ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
I guess if it really was a big model, in the background, it would be what, like some sort of mixture of experts approach where it's only lighting up a portion of the model based on what you're asking.
Right. Right, which is what I think it does anyway. I think their internal architecture, I think I actually, everything I've read, it's a mixture of experts internally anyway. And I think more importantly than even GPT-5, though, not to digress here for a second, is the fact that they released two open source models, or open weight models, I should say.
Yeah.
That I think is actually even more important because that is can have a much larger impact. I think personally.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because people are all up in arms about the GPT-5 model. And I think, as you're saying, people are sort of used to the idea that they have a choice of what model they want to run, what version of GPT-4o, for example, what size. Same thing is true if you go into other models by other providers, you get to pick your model. And I think a lot of people have gotten used to, um, you know, using certain models or certain versions of models for different types of tasks. And with
Right.
GPT-5o, you don't get that choice. Although I did see, and I haven't seen this show up in my interface yet, but I did see some people reporting that they actually have an advanced option they can turn on that brings back legacy models and allows you to pick specific models.
Uh,
But
yeah, maybe.
yeah,
I know in the pro side of things, you can still have extra thinking as a choice, and it'll come up. But this kind of begs the question, though, a little bit differently. You and I have we've touched on some of these things a couple of different times. One, I think when you're deploying commercial applications or just big applications in general, when they switch models, it can have an enormous impact on your
yeah,
application because you don't know
yeah.
what's going on in the covers. But I think even moreover, like what are the cost implications to this? Because in the past, you picked a model that was maybe smaller, but it was more appropriate for your problem that you were trying to solve, but it was less costly. Now, I haven't looked at the cost for five. I don't know what differences are there, so I can't opine on it yet. But I'm wondering, do the costs actually go up because the model is significantly larger?
So you raise two really good points. I think, we'll have to look at what the cost structure looks like because on the surface, the idea that you no longer have the ability to manipulate the cost versus
Right,
performance by picking models could be a drawback for some people. And then
right,
what you were saying earlier too about the models is interesting. I think that probably the biggest thing that's making people frustrated that I've read is that this new model just doesn't respond exactly the way that the models they were using previously did. Now, it's not the case for
right.
everybody, but if you were picking certain versions of GPT-4o, you remember like the sycophancy discussion we had a couple of months
Right.
ago when it started, heaping praise on people. And now there apparently are people upset that their AI models are no longer heaping praise on them. And that's sort of a bizarre and unexpected example of this idea that when a model
I
changes,
know.
like you lose control of how it behaves. Um,
I I find it quite amusing actually, but I think honestly, if you want sycophancy back, just prompt it up front and saying, add a lot of sycophancy to your
right.
response, and I'm
Be
sure you'll
really
get it
nice to me
back.
today. I've had a rough day. Um,
Yes. Tell me I'm
but
beautiful today, whatever. I don't know.
but I think I bring those 2 points up because they're directly relevant to what you said is sort of the hidden biggest news in the OpenAI announcement, which is the release of a couple of open weight models, right? Because those problems go away if you're running an open weight model.
Right.
Um, you actually can deal with a number of different things. So,
Right.
um,
Right. Exactly. Um,
yeah,
so, I mean, two open weight models. One is, I think, a 20 billion parameter model. One's a 120 billion parameter model. They're both mixture of expert type models. So I downloaded the 20 billion parameter model on my laptop and I got it up and running. And it was actually in my very quick tests, it seemed pretty impressive in terms of performance and the results that came back. Now, again, it wasn't a hardcore test. I just tried a couple of prompts, but I was impressed at how fast it was responding to me. So, um, I was optimistic, I should say, I guess, at the end of the day.
and 20 billion parameters is what I would say it's large for some of the downloadable open source models, but it's
Right.
still a fraction of the size of the full GPT-5o.
Oh, yeah, I don't even have an idea how big that actually is in terms of parameters. I'm sure it's way north of a trillion plus parameters. The other thing they did was to keep the sizes down. They quantized the models. So I think it's yeah I think it's I want to say 4-bit, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But they definitely quantized them. They had to in order to get the performance and the size reduction that was necessary. They had to quantize them. Not a surprise.
So I guess the question that begs for me is, do you think the people using these models, I mean, I guess if you're going to download and run one of these models locally, you have to have a certain degree of technical competency, right?
Right.
It's not the same as just signing into a web interface. But what I wonder about is, are people going to be confused or caught off guard that this 20 billion parameter model, or even the 200 billion parameter model, it's not going to respond the same way that the web-based full fat GPT-5o is. It's going to give you different results because it's a different
Right.
model. Do you think
Uh,
people are aware of that?
um, It's a really good question. But then again, I think the people that tend to be downloading these models are the more sophisticated users. They're the developers. They're the ones that are building, I would think, domain specific types of applications. Like I look at both of these models and to me, they reek of domain specific applications and fine tuning and using it for those things. And honestly, that's exactly why I would use it. I'm not using it to run it locally. I'm really using it because I want to include it in an application. So even in our case, I'm going to build an application around one of them because I think that's the right approach.
Did,
Um,
did OpenAI release any tools or frameworks to help with the fine tuning of these models?
Honestly, not that I know of. I haven't looked. I haven't looked deep enough yet. So that is, I'm going to embark on that today. That's one of the goals of today, and seeing what they actually did, what's there, um, and how rich the environment is around it, so we can see how easy it is to fine tune these types of models. Because I don't want to spend a fortune fine tuning a model, and I have to see what it's actually going to cost. And can I, in fact, do it on my laptop? Don't know. We'll see.
Interesting. Well, we'll be waiting to find
We'll
out
find
the
out.
results.
Yep.
No, but I think overall it was a solid but probably not earth-shaking release of upgrade from 4.0 to 5.0 for GPT. I mean, I've yet to see any dramatic improvements in what it does. They do claim lower rates of hallucination, but again, I haven't been able to find
Right.
any benchmarks, any independent benchmarks that verify that that's the case. So I think the jury's out on whether 5.0 itself is great, but the fact that we finally have open weight, open source models from uh, OpenAI is probably a big thing.
Well, it's a big thing considering it's supposed to be a nonprofit. I did see some stuff though in terms of metrics. For regards to health data, it's supposed to be the best model out there as of now. And from a programming perspective, it's supposed to also be one of the best. As I think Sam Altman said it in the release, it's chart porn. There's all these charts illustrating how good it is compared to the other models. Now, what I think ultimately is happening just in the general in the industry is, there's this competitive competition against metrics. and you're seeing slight improvements over time for each of them, and they're kind of coalescing around that,
Right.
um, which I think is interesting. You haven't seen dramatic changes in functionality. You're seeing just improvements in the metrics.
Really interesting. I think that's, that's the classic case of like chasing the metrics and somewhat gaming the system. As soon as someone comes up with a
Yeah,
new scorecard, we optimize our products to match that scorecard. And it's funny because I do feel like in the real world, gauging performance on an LLM is actually pretty difficult to do. Like, yes,
yeah,
if you give it the same set of canned questions and create a benchmark, you can compare two models. But when you're doing real use of the model, there's a cutoff point where, like, if the model is wrong, if it gives you back incorrect information, i.e., it hallucinates, clearly that's a failing grade on that prompt. But if I ask three different models and I get three different results back, and they're all factually correct, it becomes harder and harder to decide which one is best. Right? Do you want the one that is the longest and the most in depth? Maybe not.
right.
Maybe that most in-depth response is actually too long and not useful to you. Do you want the shortest one? Maybe not. Maybe it's lacking. Yeah, is it the middle one? Is it the
Right.
one that's in bullet points versus in prose? Like, it's a very subjective and sort of hard thing to say what's best sometimes.
Oh, look, it's like the corollary is try measuring human intelligence. You can't, not easily at least. I mean, yeah, there are metrics out there. There's your IQ numbers, which I think measures a form of intelligence. It's hard to measure intelligence. I think it's a very difficult thing to do, and we try to apply metrics that people can understand, but they capture just a small segment of the capabilities at the end of the day. And I think
Right.
some of these are highly subjective. Um, so we'll see.
Really interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, I'll just for now, I'll in my own mind, I'll chalk up GPT-5o as yet another step forward by OpenAI. They've probably closed the gap with some of their competing models. Maybe if we believe the benchmarks, they've actually surpassed some models in some domains or some areas. But just, progress keeps marching forward, I guess.
Yeah, no, and look, 5.0 has been delayed. It's been out. It was I would say almost 2 years in the making. It was coming for a long time. So they had a lot of issues with it initially. It cost a fortune to train. So I expect to see improvements. The question then becomes for the other model providers out there. I'm assuming they're going to have the exact same problems.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. And it feels like, I know we've said this before, but we're kind of in an arms race or a battle for incremental improvements right now. Like, it's
Right,
been a while since we've seen anything truly revolutionary. There were some things that
right,
came out that people thought were revolutionary, and they probably turned out to be more evolutionary right now.
Mhm.
So I
Right,
think we'll
right.
continue to see good progress, but in my mind, tell me what you think about this. In my mind, I'm still waiting for what I think is inevitable, which is we will get at some point, don't know when, but at some point, we will see a move away from the attention mechanism and the way the inferencing works today to something that is very, very efficient compared to what we have today. Because, the compute
Oh,
costs,
yeah.
the inferencing costs are still very high. It's not ecologically and environmentally sustainable to use at this scale. So
Oh, I
that'll be the next breakthrough.
I think that is the next breakthrough because I think there's limits to the attention mechanism. And like you said, like you look at Grok, I think it has, I want to say, over 100,000 GPUs servers that they actually use to train that model. Which, when companies start speaking about firing up nuclear reactors to power their data centers, you kind of know there's a problem here in terms of it. It's got to be a more efficient way. I'm sure there will be developed a more efficient way. Um, and there is talk of, certainly some of the researchers out there are speaking of more efficient ways of training some of these models, or just a radically different approach, much more akin to how humans develop intelligence, and not doing what these models do, which is take every piece of information on the planet and put it into a model. That's not the long-term right approach.
Interesting. Well, so let me ask your opinion on this. If you could solve one performance bottleneck, right? If you could fix the compute issue on training or on inferencing, which do you think is more important to fix?
I actually I'm gonna take a different approach over here. I think they're both incredibly important. I don't think you could, if you want to look at intelligence in general, both training and being able to use that knowledge equally well, I think is incredibly important. So, and I don't know if you can decouple them. I think you have to fix the problem, which is both the acquisition of knowledge and being able to learn and do it cost effectively and highly efficiently, like much like the brain, and then be able to use that information efficiently and develop the heuristics to solve a problem very quickly. So I'm not so sure you can decouple them. I think there's been a lot of work done, at least on the inferencing side,
Yeah.
to solve something. But I think those are again, it's brute force approach. It's reducing, um, the cost of communication between nodes. It's stuff like that. It's like pure engineering brute force to make inferencing better. It's not a long-term answer.
Right. I mean, I probably am being myopic when I look at it this way, but part of me says I don't really mind if training continues to be very expensive in terms of energy consumption, because training is something that, a company will do once a year, maybe twice a year. Inferencing is the thing that is poised to absolutely explode if the cost becomes low enough.
Right.
So you're right, they're probably inextricably linked, but if the cost of inferencing was even lower than it is today, we could more aggressively roll out models, and we would potentially be less focused on things like quantization and distillation and matching the model to the problem for a price performance trade-off, because
Right.
if inferencing were free or nearly free, like we talk about storage today, um, that
Mm,
might change things dramatically. And it's my analogy is storage is free in a sort of high level relative sense, and when storage became free, that changed everything about the database world and the way that
right.
data worked. Right, our databases back in the very old days when I used to work with databases in
Mm,
IMS, for example, it was all about maximizing information density and
yeah.
leveraging the storage.
Yep.
So I feel like there's a similar wave happening where when inferencing becomes free or, low enough cost to not matter, maybe that unlocks dramatic growth. I don't know. I could just be
I
stretching
don't.
to project my past experiences on this.
I don't. I don't. It's you bring up a really interesting point, and I don't know if the trajectory is the same as it was in the past with some of these other technologies that are out there. And I agree. When the cost of storage went down to near zero, and the same with compute to a large degree, it went down to near zero. I don't know if it applies. I would love to take an edge device, a small edge device, and make it independent of connectivity and be able to deploy it. And for that, I need something pretty. I don't want to have incredibly powerful computer at the edge. I want a battery operated computer at the end that can make decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's where I think it gets interesting, because imagine if you had the ability to run inferencing on a low power small edge device.
Hmm?
You could be having inferencing everywhere. Like
Right.
literally everything you say and do, you could be running through models to alert you if
Hmm.
there's an error in what you said, or if you just,
Right.
did something contrary to what you said was your goal this morning or whatever. So I mean, lots of interesting things you could do with that.
Yeah, and that requires just low power and an alternative approach to doing some of this stuff. Which who knows? Look, it could be around the corner. It can be buried in the lab someplace, just not available yet. We don't know. I don't know. It'll be interesting. In the meantime, we're using a lot of power. We're building nuclear reactors, and
Yes.
using many gigawatts of power to train a model. And then only one more point, and then we could probably switch to our other, which I find very interesting topic.
Yes.
I the models. You say train once a year. I don't know if it's that little. I actually feel like as new data is acquired during the course of a cycle or between releases, they are training fairly continuously models and roll. I think that's what they do. I'm not 100% sure. I'm fairly certain. I'm fairly certain that's what they're probably doing behind the scenes.
I'm sure you're probably right. Even though we don't see model releases that frequently, they're probably continuously training. And you know, if they've acquired all of that expensive hardware, I'm
Right.
sure they're using it 24/7, getting
Right.
maximum utility out of it. Yeah,
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I think that's certainly the case. I mean, look, in this hyper competitive world, I am sure they want to be the best at all points of time, and they're doing everything possible during this AI arms race to get the best stuff out there.
makes sense. Well, you referenced a interesting topic we have to talk about today. Should we jump
Yes.
into that?
Yeah, let's jump into that. I think that is a super interesting. You had pinged me over the weekend on this one. I was like, oh, we got to do this. This is great. And I guess it stems from an article that you had seen over the weekend as well by an ex-Googler. And it really is about, and I'll try to sum this up as best as I can, but effectively, can a model replace the CEO of a company? Is that a good way of looking at it?
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting because we've seen AI go from just very specialized little use cases to doing menial tasks, transcribing your meeting minutes and things like that. And now, especially with agentic, we're talking about AI, you know, having an impact on knowledge workers, right? On
Right.
software developers, on people doing other jobs
Hmm.
that could be augmented, enhanced, or even replaced in some cases by agentic AI.
Right.
And I guess the question is, and the question that this person raised is, why is it going to stop there? Like, should
Right.
the CEO be worried about the CEO's job? Could they be replaced by an AI agent?
Well, you ask it. I mean, it's a good theoretical question. Right now, it's a
Right?
theoretical question, but we are seeing AI move up the food chain. Certainly, with
Oh yeah,
agenda computing, we see it move further and further up the food chain. AI isn't yet, I would say, 100%. It's not goal seeking yet, but it's already in boardrooms. It's already asking boardroom questions. It's already helping boards ask the right questions and focus on topics. So, is it really that much of a big stretch to take it to the next level? Certainly, I think minimally to augment the CEO's thinking, but I think the article brought up a lot of valid points, and that's well, one main valid point: human nature, which is sometimes highly erratic.
yeah. Well, I mean, so that's a really key point. Every time we see adoption of a new technology, we start by saying, "Is it perfect?" And we as a society tend to think if it's not perfect, we shouldn't be using it, right? And this is the conversation that's going on at a national and a global level around self-driving cars, which is they're clearly not perfect. They clearly aren't good enough yet, in my opinion, for
Right,
wide scale use. But
right.
should the benchmark be near perfection, or should the benchmark be measurably better than human drivers? Um, and I think if you apply that same line of thought to a CEO, I mean, human CEOs are pretty bad sometimes. Not all of them, not all the time, but it's not like CEOs are magically perfect performing people.
No, I think as a society in general, we tend to become um, far more risk averse than we have in the past, I guess. So going back to your question, is things have to be no, I don't think things have to be perfect. I think things are never perfect. I think if they're an improvement on the current status, we should embrace them. Uh, Self-driving cars being a great example. They're better than humans, have far fewer accident rates. They will never be perfect because nothing is perfect in this world. There's no technology that I know that is perfect. You should potentially start using it. And I think CEOs in general have a unique set of a unique psychological profile for the most part. And they tend to be driven. They tend to believe in what they're talking about. They have their own view of the world, right or wrong. They have their own view of the world, and humans can only, at least cognitively, handle so many things at once. And I don't know, can AI ultimately replace a CEO and maybe with a board around it managing decisions? I don't know. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I mean, so I break it into two. I think break it into two questions. One is that even a thing we should want? Which I'd love to dive into because I think it's less absurd than first struck me when I was
Hmm.
thinking about this. And then the second is, okay, if we did want it, what would it look like? Just assuming we could wave a magic wand and make technology do what we want it to do. So I think the first part is, is it a thing we should want? Should we want AI to replace the CEO? And we'll say replace in air quotes here because
Right,
we'll have to define what that looks like. But
right.
again, I go back to I think if you look at the history of corporate politics and corporate history, there have been plenty of companies who have been damaged or outright blown up by a CEO's behavior, right? CEOs are involved in scandals.
Hmm.
They steal from their companies, they lie, they cheat. In other words, they do all the things that people do, right?
Right.
And again, not every CEO does these things, not every person does these things, but when a CEO who is a person does things that are bad or irrational or undesirable, it has an outsized effect on the company, right? If
Right.
Bob from bookkeeping goes on social media with some uh, insensitive rant, it might reflect a little bit badly on the company if it goes viral, but it's probably
Right.
not going to have the same impact that if Jane, the CEO, has a similar rant, right? So like you're
Right.
just the fallibility of a CEO is probably the same as any other human, but the impact of them being fallible is far, far greater. And
Right.
then the other part about it is they do tend to become, in a lot of companies, sort of a single decision point. And so, in theory, you've got this company full of talented people, and you've got leaders, and you've got thought leaders at all levels. And the model is you've got a CEO who leverages all these people and listens to them and takes their counsel, and they have a board of directors that advises them and steers them.
Right.
And yet, as you pointed out, all too often it doesn't work that way, because by definition the person who becomes the CEO
Right.
is driven, is self-confident, doesn't question themselves too much. And we've all heard stories about boards that become puppets of the CEO, and CEOs that shut out some of their smartest uh, employees because they're threatened by them, or they don't want them to have too much power, and just basic human behavior.
Right. Right. Um, no, all incredibly valid points. Now, I want to take even a different tack. Just let's take a ideal CEO. Let's assume he's the perfect CEO. He has, he listens to his board members. He takes in all their recommendations. He tries to assess them and he tries to apply them to reality. He listens to his executive team. He listens to everybody. Still, at the end of the day, he's trying to consume massive amounts of highly conflicting information on a daily basis. And based on that, through his own set of developed heuristics in his head over time that he's developed from his problems that he solved in the past or strategies he developed in the past, he's trying to make a decision. He's never going to have a perfect picture. He's going to do the best he can do. He might miss subtle little things, but those subtleties might be incredibly important to the outcome of whatever he's deciding.
Right.
Whereas maybe augmenting him with a tool would illustrate clearly this subtle piece of information is going to have an outsized impact on the outcomes of the problem you're trying to solve. And he, as a CEO, wouldn't have necessarily caught that.
Oh, I agree. I think even the best CEOs, and again, all these derogatory things I said about CEOs and their fallibility
No,
doesn't
but you're
apply to
right, though.
everyone, right? But even the best one, he or she's going to get tired. He or
Right.
she is not going to have a
Mm-mm.
perfect memory. Like we're humans, and we're fallible. So could AI improve the CEO's recall and ability to digest information and ability to analyze that information?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. But the point of my thought exercise here is
Mm.
what but what would it look like if you just said, maybe I don't want a CEO? Like what if you actually said, okay, I'm actually going to take this job of executive execution job and give it to AI? How would you do that? Like, assume you wanted to try that, what would you do?
That's a good thought experiment, and I want to compare that to how do I phrase this? Other decision making structures. Let's look at it that way, for lack of a
Yeah,
better way.
right.
So, and you could apply some of this, I think, to how humans manage organizations or governments or whatever. Let's look at the benefit of a CEO for a second. It's a single point of decision making, right or wrong or whatever he or she is doing. It's a single decision point. She or he is the person that is going to make a decision. Now, that sometimes is incredibly valuable, and
Yeah,
usually in times of crises when you need somebody to act very fast, that model works incredibly well.
right.
Now, in regular times, maybe you can argue a structure is more like, um, we'll call it the AI CEO, making recommendations, bringing in massive amounts of information on a real time basis, incorporating that into a decision making process, and maybe generating a set of ideas that a board will then use. And there's other types of corollaries to
Right.
that in some other countries and how they manage companies and have boards that are far more powerful, I think, than the CEOs themselves and wind up making a lot of the decisions and how that would work. And would it even work? And is it culturally the same? Like, would that even be amenable in our culture versus another culture? Like, I think there's other implications to it.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Like, how would you structure something like that? It's an interesting thought experiment. I'm not sure. There's a lot of different ways
Yeah.
it can go.
I mean, look, I'll acknowledge first off, this is all just pie in the sky speculation, right? I don't know if this could actually happen, but like a couple of things occur to me. One is, someone talked couple of months back, someone talked about, if you could use AI to clone the brain of a famous CEO, could a company be that much more powerful because you'd have, unlimited capacity of that CEO? And I actually think that's the wrong approach, right? I think done right, the AI CEO is not the clone of a single person's brain, no matter how great that person is.
Right,
It's the amalgamation of insight and wisdom from a highly selected group of people. So if you started by saying, I'm going to train my new AI CEO, not based on the current CEO's brain, but based on the top 100 people in my company, or whatever number you thought was
right,
right. But the point is, you would, in theory, then develop an artificial intelligence model that benefited from the collective knowledge and wisdom and experience of all of the people whose knowledge went into training it. Right. So
right,
immediately you get an AI model that thinks more like a team of people than a single person.
right,
Um,
right, right.
so I would
And
start there. I would probably also have that model be accountable to a council or a board or something, right? So, you're never, I don't think any of us are advocating putting an AI fully and unequivocally in charge of a corporation. But to have it actually do the executive day-to-day decisions and work under the guidance of a small group of leaders could be an interesting model, because
very,
you now have a highly reliable, tireless, egoless, and CEO who, by the way, never comes in and demands a multi-billion-dollar paycheck looking at you, Elon Musk. Right? Like, eh,
let me let
what's
me
not to like about that?
let me ask you a question, and I'll be the devil's advocate here for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Because I like to be devil's advocate. If we're training a model on the decision making process of, say, 100 different CEOs,
Hmm.
incorporated in that model and incorporated into decisions is going to be their personality by definition. It just has to be because they made a series of decisions based on some information and the outcomes there. So, is it really possible to generate a model that is ego free?
Good question. Probably not. I think the best you could do is through careful curation of that training data to put guardrails around the ego, or to point the ego
Right.
more in one direction than another. But you're right. Nothing, because these models are trained on human creation and there is some element of ego involved in everything we've ever created. I don't think any of them is ego free.
It's
Right.
human nature at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Let me take this a little different direction further. I mean, so there's the one approach you suggested, which is let's take a lot of CEO type people and let's take their personalities and their outcomes and train them in model. Or is a different approach um, where you have a series of, we'll call them business cases, where you have a very detailed business case of the current situation. And this is the outcome, and these are the decisions that were made over time, and load up tens of thousands of those so that you get a robust approach to problem solving in various different circumstances.
Yeah.
And maybe you get a richer data set there. Just thinking.
I like that. And look, I think, this is really nothing more than thought exercise. Like, I think we fully realize no company is actively looking to replace their CEO with an AI bot.
Right,
But what you're pointing to is the potential for a, we'll say, a custom developed AI tool that is the CEO's assistant.
right,
And what I like about that approach especially is that it's gives it can help ameliorate some of the deficiencies of the human mind, like perfect
right,
recall. Right.
right,
Imagine
right.
imagine if you had the sufficient power that everything you were about to do and say, every email the CEO wrote, could be screened by their private
Mm-hmm.
CEO agent to alert them, for example, are you saying anything here that is at odds with something you said previously? And
Right,
and if that model was aware of every speech they'd given, every in-house town hall they'd conducted, etc. It could say, hey, you just said this, but 3 weeks ago in Tulsa, you said something slightly different. Do you want to acknowledge the difference or correct yourself or whatever? Like,
Right,
there would
right,
be a lot
right.
of interesting capabilities there.
No, I think there's a massive number of interesting capabilities. Um, would a model, and I know we're talking about the CEO, and this actually, just so everybody knows, this actually derives from a paper or was it a paper or was it an interview by the ex-Googler who, basically said, don't share your efficiency gains because it might be coming after your CEO job. Um, would it make more sense to have a tool that is we'll call it the CEO whisperer for argument's sake. It's just, that it's always helping the CEO make some of these decisions or gut checking some of these decisions, but still, the humanness is there, his team is still there, but this is really um, uh, the silent advisor sitting there all day, consuming information real time, get a better picture of what's going on in the world, more subtle, and have that tool kind of be the whisperer to everybody else saying, well,
Yeah.
maybe this is a different point of view that you have not yet considered.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to position it because we've seen over the course of my life, I've seen a few different CEOs that have very clearly have specific people that are their whisperers, their
Right.
advisors, their kitchen cabinet, right? In one
Hmm.
case, it was a general counsel or a general counsel emeritus, actually, who was just there always to discuss ideas and deliberate things with the CEO. So I think that would be very, very, to me, would be very powerful. I'm
Right.
also thinking from a CEO perspective, they would probably be very concerned about the potential security risks, the privacy risks of this. Um, but, again, comes back to what we said earlier, is a model any less secure than a human who
No.
can be corrupted or, you
Right.
know, yeah,
Right. Right. I think, that kind of gives you I would think the benefit of both. You get a human person running an organization with this powerful tool that is advising he or she when necessary on a much deeper, more richer output than a human's ever going to give them.
Oh,
Um,
so let me ask you about transparency, though. What would you do about transparency and auditability of those conversations? So specifically, if if a CEO has a chat with their advisor and the advisor says, "I don't think you should do this," and the CEO says, "I'm going to do it anyway," that conversation is off the record, and
right.
very
Well,
often
yes.
nobody ever knows about it. If you had the CEO advisor model, what would be your stance on the obligation of the CEO to disclose what the information or advice was and which course of action the CEO chose? Would you want the CEO to say, "Well, the model said this was the best option, but I picked a different option," and why? Or do they just get to keep that to themselves?
I think if you want it to work and work well and have them embrace it, it has to be silent. I don't really think you can have it be auditable. It's no different than, somebody going to their best friend or their closest advisor and asking them the same question off the record. Those conversations are off the record by definition because you want to let your guard down. You want to expose any weaknesses. You want to be able to have that trend. You're not going to do that in a model if you know it's tracking everything you say and it's judging you. You just don't. You need it to be. I think for it to be effective, you need it to be completely secret. It's just my view. You can't. I don't. And you also don't want it to be held against them.
I agree. And what's interesting about this is that comes back to a point you made earlier in the podcast about a portable battery powered high powered edge device that could run a model, because the only way I as a CEO would ever be comfortable with that would be if that entire model was running on my iPhone or a device with no backup to the cloud anywhere, no
Right.
record that
Right.
anyone
Right.
else could ever, because it would be disastrous. Imagine the headlines if I, as the CEO, made a decision and it didn't go so well, and then weeks later, someone hacked into the servers
Right.
and was able to share that my own advising model had told me not to do this and I did it anyway. Right. The optics of
Right.
that would be terrible. So I
Right.
would only trust this if I could have it on a completely isolated edge device that could hold all of the information and the model and speak to me and me alone, and no one would ever be able to know what I had said and what advice I'd gotten back.
Right. Right. No, 100% agree. And I want to tackle, I want to come back to something we had spoken about earlier, the emotions of a CEO. There are times when I think that passion, that those things that are not capturable in a model easily, certainly, are incredibly valuable. It's that blind belief, even if it's the blind belief in themselves that is counterintuitive, counterlogical, makes zero sense to anybody on the outside, yet they feel strongly about it and they move forward and it winds up being wildly successful. How do you I mean, you can't capture that. Like the humanness you'll never
No.
capture, which is why I always think you need a human there to override anything.
Well, I mean, that's actually interesting. Some of the greatest decisions and business decisions have been made by CEOs who just said, all the data says I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I believe in
Right,
something.
exactly. Right.
And what opportunities would we lose if we only made rational decisions,
Right.
right?
And I think and it's the models are for what they're basically backward looking at the end of the day. They're not forward looking. They can't be because they're trained on data that's existence already. So it's not like they're predicting the future. I mean, they're statistically predicting the future, but they're not really, how can I say this? If something isn't in a CEO is making a decision about something that is so wild that is, the model's never going to possess anything about this. So effectively, models are always, like I said, always in some sense backward looking. Like they are based on trained information that's in existence today. Ideas that are truly new, radical, are not going to be there.
So it's funny because you almost have to wonder if an LLM model had been available at the time that people were first developing large language models, would the model have said this is a good place to spend your money? I know
Right,
that's an unanswerable question, but like I think the existence of the models we have today is probably a case of a few people deciding that although it seemed highly
right,
unlikely, they were going to pursue this work and try to make something happen. And I guess, that's how breakthroughs happen. So maybe the
right,
CEO job is not going to be replaced. I like your analogy or your approach of, giving the CEO advisory capabilities from a model. Privacy obviously would be really important.
right.
But there's probably something there. Like how that doesn't seem like something that we're very far away from doing. Do you
Well,
think is it a personality question more than a technology question at this point?
oh, I think it's a personality question more than a technology question. I think certainly you could train a model. I mean, look, you and I are speaking about doing this for um, specific domains,
We want to
train,
replace
find.
ourselves with
Yeah,
models, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
100%. We want to replace ourselves with this. And, given the abundance of information that you and I have over many decades, we can, maybe we're not going to fully replace ourselves, but we will certainly be able to build a tool that will solve a lot of problems and help people and get a sense of how Peter and David actually think. That is 100% doable where the technology is today. So let's ask a different question now. We're focusing on the CEO, but you start going down a layer or two.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's the hidden message in this article, right? Is we have talked about knowledge workers for the last 18 or 24 months as being, subject to being impacted by AI. But when people say
Right,
knowledge workers, the emphasis is on the worker, right?
right,
So you're thinking of, like, not thinking of, this is what everyone is talking about. I've had conversations with people who are saying, oh, it's entry level attorneys that are going to be replaced,
nope,
outsourced workers that are doing offshore process automation, they're going to be replaced. It's entry level coders. And I think that's probably where we've been lying to ourselves as a
right,
society,
right.
because that's where the impact is starting. But yeah, why wouldn't a team leader? Why wouldn't a department manager? Why wouldn't a business unit head be replaceable?
Oh, now we're I think more in the realm of reality, and I think that is a highly likely scenario to play out in the next year or two. If I was to make a prediction that you're going to see, it's clearly moving up the food chain. It's moving up the food chain pretty quickly, and the technology is advancing at light speed.
Yeah.
You will, in fact, see more senior managers get replaced. And there's a lot of managers out there that are operational managers. They're the ones that are just, they're not strategically thinking. They're just purely operational managers. Like, well, I don't mean pick on them, but why
Yeah.
not?
Well, I think if we look at how that starts to happen, I think this what you said is absolutely going to happen. We're going to see, middle managers and team leaders and whatnot, and even more senior managers start to get
Right,
displaced by AI. Now, in my mind, that doesn't mean that an entire manager role is replaced by AI. What I
right.
think we'll start to see is more the continued flattening of the organization, because if you think about it today, what's the span of control? You and I both worked in banks where we do these span of control exercises a few
Oh, I know.
years to sort of measure it. There's an optimum. Every manager should have at least a certain number of people and at most a different number of people. And it varies by function
Right,
and by
right.
bank. But if you had took your best department head and you got rid of the other three department heads that weren't as good, and you gave that department head enough AI support, could that department head manage all three departments? Could that department head manage three times as many people as they'd previously been managing?
I'm going to give a conditional yes. It depends, and I think it really depends because the limiting factor at that point is not access to information and access to knowledge of what they were doing. The limiting factor, I think, becomes communication amongst the reports that you're tackling. So you're going from say arguably 7 to 10 reports to now 30 or 40. That doesn't scale. Now, there are ways around that. Look, humans, as well as I do, deal with a finite number of pieces of information in their frontal lobe at any one point in time. And I think it's around between 7 and 10. So once you get past that, there's got to be a better way to manage the information flow and manage what people are doing that's more efficient. And I'm sure AI can play a major part of that. But capturing the knowledge of those three workers, those three employees, those three managers, and yeah, that to me is the easy part of the equation. It's everything else that becomes a little harder. So I think it
I
opens
think
up
it,
a
it does become harder, but I think the part that makes me hopeful that this is something we can do is my own experience has been the higher I got in an organization, the larger a team I managed. And when I was managing teams of hundreds of people, once you get to hundreds of people in a team, it doesn't matter how many direct reports you have. The point is, in most organizations, you spend way too much of your time doing things that are not value add and aren't even really the job you were hired to do. You're
well,
doing
100%.
administrative and other related things. So
Yep.
if AI could ease some of that burden, I could have been 100 times more effective. I probably could have managed double the size team. So I think there needs to be some way for AI to help flatten the organization and make people more
Right.
productive. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to, it's not a capacity issue. It's a fact that most managers spend significant amounts of their time doing things that aren't directly related to their unique skills that they have.
Oh, 100%. I think 90% of what we do is nothing related to our real skills at the end of the day. And like the higher up I got, the more admin I'm doing, and the more the less I liked my job because I was doing much more administrative work, which is not an effective use of our time at the end of the day.
No. So I think, it's really hard to know exactly where it goes, but I do think that, while the CEO is safe for now, it's really going to be, this idea of knowledge workers being the target needs to expand into anybody who is a contributor based on intellectual capacity, whether they're
Right.
the worker in the food chain or they're the supervisor or the team leader or the trainer or
Right.
whatever they are. I think AI is coming for those roles, and coming
Oh yeah.
for doesn't mean replacing the humans entirely. It means impacting the way those roles are done, maybe impacting how many of those roles are needed, but
Right. Right.
there will be some impact for sure.
Oh, 110%. And I think you'll see it move up the food chain slowly but surely. And I think what we'll see, and if I make a prediction, you'll see some of the traditional management structures and styles that were in place get replaced by, as of yet unforeseen, structures and styles to manage people very differently, since you'll have an abundance of tools out there that will allow you to do more than in the past. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing next.
Yeah, no, I think you're very right. What about, maybe let's do some predictions for the future. Um, when do you think you'll see the first public company that actually, acknowledges that they have an AI as a member of the management team?
2 years.
Okay, wow. That you didn't even have to stop and think about that one. All right.
No,
All right.
that's a
So
long. I think it might even be faster than that, but I'll say 2 years.
okay. All right. And presumably that would be what, like a proprietary AI that they've trained as sort of
Yep.
their company secret.
Yep.
Did
Yep.
they give it a name? Is it Jarvis or something?
Oh, of course. Somebody, whoever develops something like this is going to give it some name from like, Marvel or one of the other ones. And I think Jarvis is a great one. I like Jarvis. He probably give it his voice as well, because it's going to have a voice. It has to have a voice, and it's going to be a voice that sounds. It's going to be depending on the culture of the company, it'll either be a very deep, voice that has, it sounds impressive and authoritative, and you want to make it, because people, I think, generally gravitate towards that type. And that'll be tested, of course. What type of voice do you want to hear? What's going to make you listen the most? It's, not going to be a high pitched voice or something like that. It's going to be something very, has a lot of gravitas, I would think. But it'll be interesting to see how it. Yeah, I do think it'll be something that's internally developed with all the information that's internal, coupled with external information that's coming in real time, that will help augment the decision making in a management team. Absolutely, 110%. And it might even
Okay.
have an avatar associated with it. So it's like you're looking at somebody having a conversation on a Zoom call, which is a fake, is a entirely fake person.
So 2 years. So summer of 2027, we'll see this happening, if not
Now write it
significantly
down.
before. Yep.
We'll come
All
back to
right. Well,
this.
yep. Okay, one more question for you, then one more prediction. What about boardroom? Do you think you'll ever see an AI member of a board?
I think there's an incursion in the boardroom already with the tools, so I don't think it's too far away to actually have a deeper incursion. And I would say certainly within a year or two, something very similar. I think you'll see out there. You look at just looking at it somewhat objectively, looking at the practicality, having a tool there, ingesting information in real time that has also been trained on all the previous information from the firm, whatever it may be, proprietary documents, all this other stuff, and having now augmented with real time information, you're almost foolish not to do it.
So AI as a board advisor, 100%. Will we ever see AI as a voting member of a board?
I think, yeah, within 2 years also. Why would you not? If you're going to create it effectively as a super board member,
Right.
why would you not give it some authority?
I think the biggest problem we have to solve for that is how do you assign fiduciary responsibility to an
I was
AI?
just going to say that. Yep.
Right. What's the penalty you can enforce on an AI if that goes wrong? You're not going to
Well,
like put them in jail or fine them.
you're bringing up an interesting question. I mean, we don't even have the legal structures in place for some of this stuff. Like, even think about putting a CEO in place. We don't have the legal structure to put that in place today. There's no case law on that.
Yeah. How'd you like to be negotiating the first contract on behalf of an AI model?
I want a bigger data center. I want more power.
Right. More power. No, I think that's a great point. There's a lot of other ancillary considerations that we'll have to figure out on the way to getting there. I mean, one of
Yep.
the ones you're speaking about contracts, one of the ones that's really interesting to me is like, you know, what is someone hiring when they hire a
Right.
person today? Right. We've already seen. So people have been talking about I love the term super employment. Someone says they're super employed. That means they're actually that what it really means is they're doing two jobs and they don't
Right.
tell their employers that they have another job.
Right. Right.
And even that has been controversial because one school of thought is someone hires you and you owe all of your working energy to that company, or you owe 40 hours a week to that company, and you
Right.
shouldn't have another job. But then there's other people who will come along and say, well, okay, what if I give 40 hours a week to that company? Who's to tell me I can't spend 40 hours, my other another 40 hours working for another company? Why, how could you tell me I can't do that? Or,
Right.
and then the next step in that process is, but what if I can get all my work done in 30 hours for company A?
Right.
Can I give time to company B? Because you're hiring me for a job, not for, are you hiring the use of my body for 40 hours a week, like a laborer, or are you hiring me for the deliverables I can create? And if I create them faster, is that time benefit mine or is it yours, the company's?
Well, I mean, traditionally, we all understand when a company hires you, they're hiring you to be there a certain number of hours. I mean, I think that's the common in definition. But I think COVID upended that, and really is it about
Yeah.
work output instead, which is how most, I think, certainly knowledge work is viewed. It's about output. It's not about my time in a seat. It's really about my capability and my output. So, what's restricting me from doing other work if my output is, and now with the tools, my output could even be higher. What's restricting me? And we're kind of getting into tools. I do think we're with tools, and this is going to accelerate further with the AI tools, is the legal definition of work. What does it really mean for the legal issues around this? I think we're opening up a big old can of worms that is, it's got to be thought through. How does this impact the nature of work and the employee employer relationship, and how different is it? Because it's going to change, and it's probably going to change quite dramatically.
Well, and that's, because where I'm going with this is I can see a day in which I'm sure someone will try this in the near future, is creating multiple agents that behave and act like the person, and having those agents each has a job at a different company. And the person does face-to-face interaction just enough to keep the facade that there's really a person there, but the work is all done by an agent that they've developed.
And
Um,
it's not far away. I mean, it's something you and I talk about on a daily basis.
yeah, yeah. So, it goes back to what you're saying, which is we just aren't ready for some of this in terms of, legal constructs, definition of work, um, how we measure value, etc.
Yeah, no, I think we're embarking on some really interesting times. It's opening up a lot of very philosophical questions, which I know, this is let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's break, let's figure out what's going to go on. But it's, at the end of the day, we're opening up a lot of questions that have to be answered before I think it's truly embraced at a very deep level.
No, I agree. And it's the only option is to figure them out as quickly as we can, because I don't think anyone's going to be successful in getting any of the large AI companies to slow down their research or delay the release of models intentionally, right? You can't stop this
No,
kind of progress.
no, and no, should we? I mean, let's face the facts. I mean, there's competition externally from the United States that's racing ahead of this as quickly as we're racing ahead of it. So, putting the brakes, pausing it. I'm always, and I have to admit, I'm always utterly baffled when people recommend regulations, because for me, regulations always imply slowing down, putting controls, and putting people in charge of something they don't understand. So I'm always very skeptical of that. And we are in a place where things are just moving at lightning speed, and we want to do nothing to slow. I think we want to do nothing to slow that down.
Yeah. Well, so my final thought for the day is it's interesting as you say that. I was thinking we're all trying to figure out which companies will be the successors, the survivors in this AI race in terms of, companies in any industry. Who's going to adopt AI and be the winner in their industry? And I think everyone's been focused on, how much can you deploy AI and how much value can you get from it? But I
Right.
guess what this conversation has made me realize is the other critical factor in achieving success with AI is going to be how can you solve these ancillary problems? How do you solve the problem about people in your workforce and how to compensate them and how to retain them, about how to integrate advice from an AI into business decisions? It's the soft issues as much as the engineering and investment and process automation
Right.
challenges.
I even think about what we just spoke about, the whole conversation on in the CEO role. I mean, most of that's soft skills. It's people issues, it's human issues, and upending hundreds of years of case law, and 100 years of management experience and theory. You're upending all of that.
Really interesting. It's going to be a journey.
A fascinating journey, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
Very fascinating journey. Next 5, 10 years are going to be, I think, mind-boggling.
Well, who knew that a simple headline about CEOs should be worried about their own jobs would turn into such an interesting thought exercise? But I love that we got to explore this a little bit. And if you're a CEO and you're offended by anything we said, we get it. We're not saying all CEOs are um, detriments to their companies. The vast majority, just like the vast majority of people out there, are great. But when things go wrong, they go really wrong. It's nonetheless a
Exactly.
good thought exercise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's one I think a lot of managers, CEOs can and should be having.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's while we don't know where it's gonna go, the one thing we're pretty confident saying is don't stick your head in the sand and, you know,
Oh, no, no.
sit
Hope
this
is not
one
a
out.
strategy. Building a moat around your existing organization is not a strategy. That is a I'm sorry. It is a strategy. It's a strategy for failure.
Yeah. Yeah. Because a moat can trap you as much as it can defend you.
I like that. I didn't think of that. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
I
Hey.
never think of it that way.
So anyway, Peter, it's been great. Good way to always a good way to start a week on a Monday morning talking about some
Yes,
brain ticklers and interesting stuff.
yes, yes. No, I always enjoyed these conversations. They always kind of prep you for the week, brain going in the morning on a good old Monday morning.
Perfect. Well,
All
listen,
right.
it's been another fruitful hour on Call Me Data, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching Call Me Data. If you enjoyed our podcast, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to us on YouTube, and make sure to stay up to date with us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.